In the 1890s, New York City was home to over 150,000 horses, producing mountains of manure and chaos in the streets. Almost overnight, everything familiar vanished. In just a single generation, the horse-driven city became a world of asphalt, engines, and endless motion. Within a single generation, everything changed. Every corner of the city pulsed with the sound of hooves. In the late 19th century, horses powered almost everything that moved. Trolleys groaned along tracks. Delivery wagons creaked under sacks of flour, and carriages lined up outside theaters and hotels. On a busy morning, New York's streets swarmed with more than 150,000 horses, each one essential for hauling people, goods, and even the city's garbage. The numbers were staggering. A single horse produced about 22 pounds of manure every day. Multiply that by the city's herd, and mountains of waste piled up faster than sanitation crews could clear it. Flies clouded the air, the stench seeped into every alley, and the threat of disease hung heavy over neighborhoods. Behind the scenes, livery stables formed the backbone of city life. In Manhattan alone, thousands of stables sprawled across blocks, long, low buildings packed with stalls, haylofts, and the constant bustle of stable hands. Peter McShane, the city's street commissioner, once warned that the manure question was one of the city's most serious problems. Stable managers juggled endless deliveries, feed orders, and the grim daily task of hauling away dead horses, over 15,000 carcasses a year in New York alone. Feed costs soared, and a Manhattan livery owner complained to a reporter that horses were becoming too expensive to keep, with animals dying faster than they could be replaced. Yet for all the trouble, no one could imagine another way. Horses set the rhythm of daily life. They pulled milk to doorsteps, ice to kitchens, and children to school. The city was built for them and around them. For most people, the idea of a world without horses seemed as distant as a city without streets. In 1886, a German engineer named Carl Benz received a patent for a strange three-wheeled contraption powered not by oats and hay, but by gasoline and gears. The Benz patent motor wagon sputtered along at a cautious pace, its single-cylinder engine rattling the nerves of anyone nearby. Most onlookers dismissed it as a toy for tinkerers, unreliable, noisy, and prone to breakdowns. Even in the age of invention, the idea of replacing a city's worth of horses with these fragile machines seemed almost laughable. But invention alone rarely changes the world. In the summer of 1888, Bertha Benz, Carl's wife and quiet partner, set out before dawn with her two teenage sons. Without telling her husband, she steered the motor wagon out of Mannheim and onto the open road, determined to prove its worth. Over the course of 106 kilometers to Pforzheim, Bertha faced empty fuel tanks, broken chains, and steep hills. She stopped at a pharmacy in Wiesloch for Ligroin, an early form of gasoline, and patched up the car's ignition with her own garter. When the wooden brakes wore down, she convinced a cobbler to nail leather onto them, inventing the first brake linings on the spot. By the time Bertha arrived in Pforzheim, word of her journey had spread. She had shown that the automobile could do more than just circle a courtyard, it could connect cities. Still, the motor wagon was expensive, slow, and hard to start. Alternatives appeared too. Electric cars glided quietly through city streets, favored by doctors and wealthy urbanites, while steam-powered vehicles hissed and clanked along country roads. Yet each faced its own hurdles. Batteries were heavy and slow to recharge. Steamers needed time to build pressure and constant water stops. Gasoline engines, for all their promise, were finicky and hard to trust. For now, the horse still ruled. Early cars were marvels of ingenuity, but hardly practical for the chaos of daily life. They needed champions willing to risk embarrassment and breakdowns in public view. Bertha Benz's determined drive was more than a technical test. It was a public dare, maybe. Just maybe. Another way was possible. Inside the Highland Park plant, the air thrummed with motion. Metal parts clattered down chutes, engines swung overhead on chains, and every worker moved with the relentless pace of the line. Before this, building a car meant teams crowding around a stationary chassis, each task waiting for the last. It could take more than 12 hours to assemble a single Model T. Then, in 1913, the moving assembly line changed everything. Now the car itself rolled forward, passing from one specialist to the next. Each worker repeated a single motion, tightening bolts, fitting wheels, attaching fenders, over and over, every few minutes. The rhythm was mechanical, almost hypnotic. One worker remembered his first day. The car never stopped. My hands learned faster than my mind. The results were staggering. Assembly time dropped from 12 hours to 2.5 hours. Every car that rolled off the line cost less to make, and that savings reached buyers. Ransom Olds had experimented with stationary lines and standardized parts a decade earlier, but Ford's moving line turned the trickle into a flood. In 1901, Olds built 425 cars. By 1914, Ford's plant could build that many before lunch. The line ran so efficiently that even a short pause rippled through the whole factory, sending foremen sprinting to fix jams. Workers found themselves part of a living machine, their labor measured in seconds, not hours. Each finished car meant another family could afford to trade hay and harness for a steering wheel and a tank of gasoline. The promise of the automobile was no longer reserved for the wealthy or the bold. It was now within reach for ordinary people, and the world outside the factory gates was about to feel the difference. A Model T rolled off the line at $850 in 1908, and it was still out of reach for most families. But by 1916, the price tag had plunged to just $260. Animated price charts from this era show a line dropping faster than most Americans had ever seen for any major purchase. Suddenly, a car cost less than a good horse and buggy. That was not an accident. The assembly line's relentless efficiency, slashed costs, and policy and infrastructure kept the momentum going. In 1913, Pittsburgh saw the opening of the country's first purpose-built gasoline station. No more hunting for fuel at hardware stores or pharmacies. Drivers could finally fill up and keep moving. Within a few years, filling stations dotted city corners and small towns, making gasoline as easy to find as oats once were for horses. Roads transformed too. In 1916, Congress passed the Federal Aid Road Act, unlocking $75 million to help states pave highways. Concrete and asphalt replaced rutted dirt, connecting cities and countryside in ways horses never could. The Good Roads movement, once a cyclist's cause, now had the federal government and the automobile on its side. Then came the war. World War I forced American factories to build at a scale never seen before. In 1917, the military ordered 25,000 trucks, and by 1918 that number exploded to over 227,000. When peace returned, surplus trucks flooded the market, driving prices down even further and sending a wave of vehicles onto American roads. If you enjoy discovering how technology keeps reshaping our world, consider subscribing so you do not miss the next evolution story. The story of the car's rise was no straight line. It was a cascade, set off by falling prices, new roads, and the sudden freedom to go anywhere fuel could take you. A blacksmith named Bill Potter once hammered out horseshoes in a shop that rang with the sound of iron on anvil. In towns like Dearborn, his skills kept wagons rolling and carriage wheels true. But by 1920, the world he knew had nearly vanished. In 1890, more than 13,000 carriage building firms crowded the country. By the end of the next generation, only 90 remained. Blacksmiths, wheelwrights, and stable hands watched as customers disappeared, their shops shuttered or converted into garages for the new machines. Bill found work at the Ford plant, trading his forge for a welding torch, shaping Model T frames instead of shoeing hooves. For every craftsman who adapted, many more were left behind. Yet as carriage factories closed, new jobs sprang up: mechanics, service station attendants, and assembly line workers. The horse economy faded, replaced by an engine-driven world that demanded new hands and new dreams. Patterns repeat themselves across centuries, even when the details change. The rise of the automobile was not just about a clever engine or a new gadget, it was a chain reaction. First, prices dropped until almost anyone could buy in. Then roads and filling stations spread, making cars practical for daily life. Finally, the culture shifted, and owning a car became a symbol of freedom, not just a way to get from one place to another. On Sunday afternoons, families piled into their Model T for a drive with no destination, just because they finally could. That same trio, affordability, infrastructure, and culture still drives change today. Electric vehicles are getting cheaper, charging stations are multiplying, and suddenly the idea of a silent, battery-powered commute feels normal. Autonomous cars and micro-mobility options like electric scooters and bikes are starting to reshape city streets, just as cars once did. What feels permanent can shift in a single generation, turning today's everyday routines into tomorrow's relics. Change moves faster than we ever expect. Today, entire industries and ways of life can vanish within a decade, just as they did before. The next transformation is already in motion. No technology stays on top forever. Stay curious and subscribe for more stories about the next big shift.